Welcome back to Ibogaine Uncovered, where we explore the healing potential of Ibogaine through the voices of those leading this global movement. Today's guest is Adam Marr, a veteran policy strategist and one of the most influential voices advancing Ibogaine treatment for those who've served. After flying combat missions as an Apache helicopter pilot, Adam found himself navigating an entirely different battlefield: PTSD, emotional disconnection, and the limitations of conventional mental health care. His personal healing journey with Ibogaine didn't just change his life, it ignited a mission. From co-founding veteran-centered psychedelic coalitions to being a key ally in starting Beond Service, Beond's veteran program, to being part of Texas passing the largest publicly funded psychedelic research initiative in the U.S., Adam's work bridges policy, personal story, and collective transformation. In this conversation, we explore the arc of Adam's path, from the battlefield to the psychedelic healing space, from spiritual reconnection to national advocacy, and what it really takes to bring Ibogaine into the heart of the public healing. Let's dive in. Adam, welcome to Ibogaine Uncovered. It's wonderful to have you here.
It's good to be here. Can you tell people how we met?
We met in, great, I love that you're interviewing me. That's hilarious. We met in Kentucky probably a couple of years ago. I was pregnant and we were at
about 2 years.
We were at the testimony for the Kentucky Opiate Abatement Fund.
Yeah, it's so wild. I remember because we met at the hotel the night before. Everybody was meeting up there. Everybody that flew in was staying there, and we had a chance to connect that night and kind of share just a little bit about our stories. And I just remember I was like, wow, Talia has such a presence and a poise and he just exuded this kind of like strength like behind your story. And we didn't go deep into the weeds because, then the next day we were sharing our testimonies of these experiences.
Right next to each other.
Right next to each other the whole day. It was one of the most impactful days of my entire life. Also found out at the end of the day that it was General Seal's 77th birthday, which he didn't announce to everybody until he was giving his comments, testifying. But yeah, you went, we were a little bit later in the lineup and you went right before me. And there was not a dry eye in the room. And that was the first time that I had really kind of heard about the expression of Beond as a result of your experience.
That's so wild. And now here we are. Likewise, your testimony was very powerful. There was probably 30, 35 testimonies those 2 days. And I remember yours very clearly.
Yeah.
And all the work that you've done to get to where you are today, the advocacy work, your family healing with your brother, how you're pushing the needle forward really for psychedelic mental health and veterans. So I'm really honored to have you here. My first question is, how does one, what was your childhood like? How does one become an Apache helicopter pilot? And, what led you up to that point as a child?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a great childhood. I had 2 older brothers, 1 younger brother, loving parents, grew up in a Christian household in Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas. Yeah, my senior year of high school was September 11th. And so, we had just started. I just turned 18 that summer. And, you're excited for your last year of high school and trying to figure out like what comes next. And then to see the towers, kind of come down that day. It was a lot for everybody that saw it. And then it was a lot of uncertainty, for what happened. I was thinking about college. My mom, was kind of adamant that that's what I needed to do next. But like I hadn't had like a long-standing goal of where I was going to go. I actually applied that fall and got into to TCU, and then we went and visited early and found out just serendipitously we were running late to the luncheon, and there was 1 table left, and there were a couple of people in Army uniforms. We're like, what is the Army doing here? This is strange. So we sat down and they're like, yeah, we have a ROTC program here, Reserve Officer Training Corps. Like, what's that? And they're like, well, why don't you come by and we'll tell you about it. And so I was played football, played basketball, ran track, power lifted, really good grades. I was a youth leader at the church, and I was an Eagle Scout, so I was like kind of like a perfect, fit for them.
All
And
American.
yeah, because September 11th they like offered a scholarship, and so ended up getting a full ride to TCU, which is a private school, and spent 4 years as the war was kind of kicking off and the world was trying to figure out, what exactly, was the response going to be. So I knew that I was joining ROTC while the country was at war. What I didn't know is what the world was going to look like in 2006 when I graduated. And the closer it got, the more you realize that, oh, this thing is not going to end, anytime soon. And between your junior and your senior year, you come back in college, and you have this month-long camp that you have to go to. It's like 30 days and kind of like a little boot camp for these cadets and stuff. And so you get evaluated on all your leadership and physical fitness, all sorts of things. And then you come back, and you and your class rank all the branches in the Army from like 1 to 16. So infantry, aviation, armor, tanks, finance corps, all the things that make, the Army operate. I think 3 of your top 5 have to be combat arms. And so my number one choice was aviation. And there's some kind of algorithm for the entire country for every cadet at every college and university. And they take like their 4 years of grades, how they did at the summer camp, their extracurricular activities, whether or not they were on a D1 sports team. And they create this ranking of like 1 to 4,000. And then they take your requests, and then that's how they pair you up. And yeah, so I was just really fortunate to get my first choice, which was aviation. So I graduated, I commissioned as a second lieutenant, went to Fort Rucker, Alabama, and yeah, started flight school in 2007.
And what was that like once you graduated and, being in
Oh,
the military, and what type of a mindset and training did that entail?
yeah, it was great. I loved it because you'd spent 4 years, in academics, in practical theory, like training to become an officer. So that was part of the program. So for 4 years, you're being told like when you're an officer, when you're a lieutenant, when you have soldiers, like what kind of leader are you gonna be? And I was like, yeah, I don't know. What kind of leader am I gonna be? But flight school really wasn't about leadership. It was about developing a tactical and technical proficiency within the aircraft. One, to be able to take it off and land it each time. But then as you progress through, by the time you graduate, and specifically with the Apache, you had to go through different, phases. So at first it's, can I just take off and fly it? The most challenging phase is called the bag. So the Apache is a two-seat, two-pilot aircraft, no passengers, and it's tandem, so you have a front seater and a back seater. So in flight school, the instructor pilot would be in the front seat during the day in this phase, and they would actually put blackout curtains in the back. So you couldn't see, but we had this little monocle that attaches to a sensor on the front of the aircraft. So with our, big old Star Wars helmet on and this little monocle that attaches, you would do it down, and you could see, just through this little guy. And you have to go out and fly traffic patterns and do all the maneuvers with no um, sensory perception through your eyes outside of the aircraft. So it's like this incredibly foreign thing. It's like one of the most challenging kind of like video game scenarios where you're actually in control of this 18,000-pound aircraft, but you can only like see it through this thing. And for me, that was actually the most challenging initially, not for like the flight mechanics of it, but because you couldn't see as the aircraft was moving. So it's kind of like being in the back of a car on like a real bumpy road, and they're making turns when you're not really seeing it. So you got like really nauseous. So you had to like do an hour of flight training, and I could only do like 20 or 30 minutes before I would have to like pull the curtain down because I was getting too nauseous. And if you can't progress, then the class will just leave you behind. You may get the chance to do it again, kind of like a sibling rivalry thing. There's other aircraft that the Army flies, the Chinook, the Black Hawk, used to be the Kiowa. And the joke was always like, if you couldn't make it in the bag, then they would just recycle you to a Black Hawk. It'd just be like, well, you can't fly the Apache, but you could fly a Black Hawk. So to all my Black Hawk pilots out there, I'm just kidding. I love you. But yeah, so that was it. So, but yeah, you work through that. Also have to fly. And it's not just about flying for the Apache because we have rockets, missiles, and 30 millimeter cannon underneath. So you have to understand like all the ballistics and information of and how to deploy the different munitions, effectively and safely. And so it's the longest flight school out of all the aircraft because it's the most like technically sophisticated aircraft. Man, I loved it. I mean, it was really hard. You have to study all the time. You're constantly getting evaluated on everything that you know from the systems, from the emergency procedures, from the fundamentals of flight, from flight aerodynamics to how to fly in airspace, to being able to have the tactical operations in a combat situation, or the weapon systems and being able to operate through that. So it's such a significant amount of information that you just like eating a whale. You just a bite at a time, and you're constantly being tested and evaluated. Everything is graded and performance measured. So it's a highly competitive environment, very driven type A people who all are driven to be the best. And at one point in time, if you're fortunate enough, then you graduate and just enough to be incredibly dangerous. Uh, Not so much like in the wartime mission, more like you just turned 16 and you got the keys to the car and you got your driver's license and you're probably the most dangerous person on the road.
Oh, wow. Where were you first deployed?
So first was I got orders to Fort Riley, Kansas, and so that's where I did the most of my operational time. And that's First Combat Aviation Brigade, uh, 1-1 Attack Reconnaissance Battalion. And I went in as a platoon leader, as a captain, an O3, and then we came on orders to go to Iraq. And so I had met my wife in flight school. She was just a local Southern belle, and invited her to come up to Kansas, and ended up proposing to her. And it was like we could be engaged for 18 months, 5 months up to the deployment, deploy for a year, and then come back. Or we could just go ahead and get married like a civil kind of thing. And we chose to do that. And so we had 5 months together before I deployed, and she moved home to be with her family. And yeah, 2010, we were going to Iraq. I was stationed at Taji there for a year, and I got into the country, and we're in Kuwait, which is where we go right before we forward deploy into Iraq. And the aircraft are, still getting in. We're just kind of ramping up our operations. And I go to the little phone banks where we can call home, and I call my wife, and she's like, "Oh, surprise! I got news for you. We're pregnant." And I was like, "What?" I was like so shocked. It was not forecasted or planned. Equally excited, but also starting to realize like, oh, I'm gonna be gone for a year. This was not what we planned. And yeah, so on the family side of the deployment, was I missed the entire 9 months of the pregnancy. I missed like every ultrasound. We timed it up where I was gonna try and go home for the birth, because we get 2 weeks of R&R, and my daughter came early, and so I ended up like missing the birth too. And I got home like 2 weeks after she was born, and that was great. But like going back for the last 3 months, like I've never been like diagnosed clinically depressed for anything. Never really experienced a lot of mood disorders growing up, but I bet I probably could have been diagnosed for depression when I got back for those last 3 months. Because like here you are, a new father, miss the whole pregnancy. Now I'm like leaving my wife and my newborn daughter at the airport to go back to a war that I wasn't really sure what we were doing at that point, and we certainly weren't deploying. Well, the Apache is for attack and reconnaissance. We weren't doing a lot of attacking in Iraq, at that time. So a lot of the purpose of why we were there and what this war was all about was starting to kind of seep in. And yeah, that was kind of the entry point into my military career, a quick deployment, and ended up going on to later become company commander of Charlie Company when I got back. Did that for 13 months. Went back to the captain's career course, and then became what's called an OC, an observer controller, and that was in Louisiana at a base where there was it's basically the where units come to do their last train up before they go to Iraq or Afghanistan. So it's like the big um uh exercise for all the units to come together who are going to deploy together to kind of get that final validation and preparation before they go over. So my job was to have every attack company that came through, I would partner up with them from the time that they knew that they were coming down to when they arrived to when they kind of ramped up their operations. Then we would go and fly in helicopters behind them and evaluate their tactics that they were doing. And then we were also responsible for the airspace. So as part of these live fire and joint training exercise, we would have C-130s, actually jump real paratroopers in to like an airfield, a mock airfield. And then the helicopters would come in and we would go against, opposing enemy forces to simulate combat. But we were actually really in charge of, making sure the airspace was clear and safe. And so it was quite a lot to manage, but I really enjoyed the job. Did that for 2 years. And it was about that time that my older brother started experiencing some of the effects from the signature wounds of war.
He was in the
Yeah, he was in the Army. He was Special Forces Green Beret. And yeah, I mean,
this is really where the mental health
Yeah.
piece starts to come in and challenges
yeah,
the
exactly.
experience he experienced.
For like nine, almost 10 years, it was just put the heads down and become the best Apache pilot that you can. When I wasn't flying, I was being with my family and, probably like drinking, alcohol, not like crazy, but, on the weekends we went for it and then show up to work and, be ready to perform.
Is it like kind of you're on autopilot while you're working?
Yeah, I mean, well, like just as far as alcohol or
Well, well, when you get home, yeah, what is that like?
yeah, well, it's like it's so intense at work and it's so much of your analytical, mental faculties to be able to, it's one thing just to be able to fly the aircraft, but then it's another thing to fly the aircraft, be responsible for, 8 of them. When I was 27 years old, I was responsible for 8 Apaches worth $250 million worth of equipment that was signed to my name and the 30, soldiers and their families that I was responsible for. And when you go to combat, then you have to prepare all them, and make sure that the families are taken care of. So, um, it's one thing to be a pilot. It's another thing to be, an officer in the United States military. And it's a heavy, mantle of leadership that we wear. And I spent so much time trying to become the best, most proficient pilot that I could be. Because also, if you're a leader, your men and your women, like if you can't maneuver the aircraft well, then they're not going to respect you. So it's like this additional thing of, trying to be the best pilot you can be while also making sure that you're the best leader that you can be. You should be a better leader first. Um, so coming home, I mean, we are wound so tightly, just as a way of life, as existing. So for me, for 10 years, it was just a constant state of like, I'm going to be evaluated on my knowledge and performance, and everybody's looking at me to see how I perform. And the more complex or critical, to life that it gets, the more calm and collected like we're supposed to be. So I actually thrive quite well in complex and demanding, even chaotic environments because there's only so many things that can be done, and you just kind of start working through your emergency procedures coming off. It's like, how do you turn that off? They're not teaching us mindfulness practices, or at least they weren't when I was going through. So
Yeah, what do you do when you come home and everything's
drink.
quiet? When everything's quiet and safe and you're not, fighting. What is that transition like mentally, emotionally, spiritually?
I became bankrupt, like me personally, like over time, and like really just consumed a lot of time with drinking or, studying or working out. Like, I mean, that was it. I don't know.
And in parallel to this, your brother also really struggled.
Yeah, so that was kind of like the first thing where I really kind of saw an extreme, kind of version of the signature wound of war. So he got back from his last deployment in 2013. Sometime, I mean, I noticed a significant uptake in his drinking and like watching a lot of his deployment videos just over and over, but I don't know, it was just a little irregular. Then there was a something that sticks out where he called and he was like sobbing and crying, and he's just such a tough guy, man. And so like this was completely foreign. I mean, I hadn't seen this guy cry since we were kids, 2 years older.
So that's when you knew there's a real problem.
Yeah, I was like, what's wrong? Somebody die? Like, what is, he's like, I just don't know what's going on. I was like, well, what do you mean you don't know what's going on? But it was the cracks in the dam were starting to show, and the things that were coming up for him. He was a breacher on his special forces, operational detachment alpha is what they call him. So when they went out, he was responsible for finding the IEDs and diffusing them, and they were in Afghanistan. And so every time a concussive blast wave goes off, you may not have something blown off, but that blast wave permeates through your brain. It will actually cause the outer shell of your brain, which is like the soft consistency of butter, to smack against your skull. Every time the brain touches the skull is technically a mild traumatic brain injury. So one concussive blast wave could literally do thousands of all around.
Wow, and he probably experiences hundreds of times.
Thousands. Yeah,
on the way.
because you got to train for it, too, to be able to do it in combat. So he had all that. He also played football in college. He also played football in high school. So all those head traumas.
TBI.
Yeah, and it's not just like one time and then it resets. It's a culminating effect throughout the entirety of your life. So
Wow, so he calls you up. He's in real bad shape. What do you do? Where do you go? Because
yeah, I think at that point it was just well, why don't you listen to the doctors? Like, why don't you listen to the military doctors? And he's like, I'm doing what they're saying. I'm taking the medications. So this was the entry point into the broken military medical system, into the broken healthcare system, into a symptom masking medication being prescribed for every symptom instead of going to the root cause. My brother just kind of came to the conclusion that if he continued on the path that was being recommended to him, then he would die. And he was, pretty close with this.
he was on a bunch of medication.
Yeah, 13 different medications.
He had tried a bunch of therapy, traditional.
I think he went through all the traditional approaches. He went to the National Intrepid Center of Excellence, NICO. They're like, yep, you definitely had a TBI. Make sure you keep a pen and paper with you and write things down, because this is your new way of life. This is like your new reality.
Was he suicidal?
Of course. Yeah. And not only that, but he had his career taken away from him. He was an E7. He had 5 kids at the time. Now you have loss of, your mental faculties. He was forgetting where he was, driving home from work every day, starting to forget like the names of his kids, anxiety, depression, like all these things. And then you say, well, how am I even going to provide for my family? How am I going to have, income? And he personally made the decision that he was going to get better. So, there's something there about the power of our minds.
Like, I'm not going to give up no matter what. I'm going to explore every alternative that there is.
Yeah, for him it was I think the way he would say it is I'm going to return no matter what it takes. I'm going to return to my pre-injury status and become the father and husband that I should be, for my family. So it was a bold
Affirmation.
an affirmation. Yeah. And, he's kind of one of the first people that really kind of showed me, how to do this. He found Joe Dispenza and the neuroscience of change. And so 2014, 2015, I guess on the other side, I'm skipping around a little bit. So he went through like the worst of it. And within that, we found this doctor in Southern California, Dr. Mark Gordon, Millennium Health Centers. And he had a protocol doing a lab test, looking at 28 different biomarkers in the brain. He could assess your hormone deficiencies and disruption from the physical trauma to the head. And so based off that analysis, a detailed patient questionnaire, he would put you on an individualized protocol to rebalance the hormones in your brain, reduce the swelling, which is inflammation, and then quality of life returns over time. And so that's what happened to my brother in 2014. And he was like, I was still in at that point. He was just getting out. I was planning to go back and go to Rice in Houston and get my MBA. He was like, no, come back to DFW where we're from, start this nonprofit with me. And I was just like, cool, man. My older brother needs help. He's asking me, will you help me? And I'm like, yes, I will.
Yeah, to help other veterans who are struggling with mental health.
And I looked up to my older brother my whole life, so I thought being with him would be great. And there was like no business plan. There was like,
This was your MBA training.
yeah, it was. There was, we just knew that we were gonna make it work. And it was, how could we get this thing that gave a little bit of relief and hope to my brother, to the rest of the veteran community.
Because back then there must have been not many nonprofits for veterans in mental health focusing on alternatives. I think there was quite a few like after Vietnam, but it was more on traditional mental health alternatives and, maybe some EMDR later and then medications, but nothing focusing on TBI and this doctor you had discovered and later Ibogaine.
My brother was like, we're gonna start a nonprofit. I was like, why? I was like, why would we do that? Why wouldn't we go into business and do something? And so we didn't know anything about it. There were other VSOs around. But once we saw this, Debbie Lee, Mark Lee, was the first Navy SEAL killed in Iraq. She had raised some money through her foundation, America's Mighty Warriors. So there were some that were starting to emerge. My brother went and talked at the Boot campaign, who Sherry Rulin came down here. And so people were just starting to think about things a little bit differently. The next generation of nonprofits was kind of starting to raise up. You had Wounded Warrior Project and some of the really big ones.
Jesse was a couple years later.
Jesse Gould was 2017. We got 501c3 in 2015. And so this was like very specifically focused on traumatic brain injury and PTSD. We didn't even really give ourselves the moniker of like veteran mental health. We were kind of like more niche with that, but in that space. And so, no, it was really hard because not only do we have to figure out nonprofit, not only do we have to figure out how to like take care of ourselves and our families, we also had to tell people that you could heal from your TBI and become really smart on the science. Like, I'm an Apache pilot. What do I know about this? So trying to dig into the studies and develop this new language and vocabulary. And yeah, so it was really challenging to do. But the doctor was treating some kind of like life extensions type people in Southern California. So one of his patients was Joe Rogan. And so September of 2015, we had only been like 8 months old. And we went to go on the Joe Rogan podcast, which episode 700. So he had already had like a fair amount under his, in that he had completed, and we knew that it would be a big deal. And we kind of had this like fundraising campaign. And so my brother would kind of set the vision and I would make the vision a reality. That was kind of our teamwork. And we show up and it's me, it's Doc Gordon, it's my brother. And we're in his studio and you see like the werewolf that he does in all the pictures and stuff. And it's just like this, it's like this little shopping center in Burbank at the time. It was like 3 studios ago. And it's just this like little blacked out, door. There's no signage or anything. It's like where like a dentist office could be like right next door. And you go in and he's just got the pool table and it's all this stuff. And then you go in like one other door and it's just like, I was like, oh, this is what I see in all the clips. So it was wild. He was a little bit sick that day and came in, and then we're getting in and I'm thinking we're all going to be on the podcast because it wasn't said otherwise. And then Joe's like, we only do 2 on the microphone because if it gets 3, it's like a little
It's a big
too
party.
much.
It's a
Yeah.
party, yeah.
And so I was like, oh, I think he just told me I'm not going to be able to
I'm
be on
gonna
the
sit down,
podcast.
yeah.
So if you go and find the YouTube clip for episode 700, there's a couple cuts where you can see me typing in a laptop in the back room of the corner behind Joe's head.
But I fully believe that you'll be on Rogan in the future for all the work you've done since
Thank you
2015.
for saying that.
That's very cool that the nonprofit that you and your brother started were featured on Rogan. And that certainly helps with the message and carrying the
Yeah.
work that you did. So how did you first discover Ibogaine? It must have been around then.
Yeah, that was 2015 that we did the podcast. Ibogaine came 3 years later. So I guess the quick arc there is once we started saying, hey, I was a veteran, and that was kind of what we told on the podcast was, I was a veteran, I wasn't okay, the system didn't work for me. I went and found this thing. It worked really well for me. If you're experiencing this, you should have access to this. So the formula was set, you know what I mean? And that podcast opened up so many doors.
This was before you were doing advocacy work as well.
Yeah,
I can
correct.
see how
Correct.
that, the problem and the solution, then you need to gain accessibility.
No, we just wanted to get people treatment because we knew the statistics at that point in time. It was like, I think 400,000 TBIs in 2015. You know, the Congressional Budget Office was spending $15,000 a year on some of the TBI. They weren't getting better, and that number was increasing. And of course, 17 to 44 veterans a day for 15 years at that point. Now we're, 22 years, over 140,000 veteran suicides. So I didn't know that the problem would continue to be stagnant and not go away. So it was always about, look, my brother's life was saved by this. So it's our moral obligation to share this with the community. Oh, like, how are we going to change the VA and the DoD? I don't know. We did actually have a bold ambition to do it within 5 years. Um, but it was like we needed that kind of big thinking, and we're just like, screw it. Like, we're going to start the nonprofit, and we're going to go and like figure this thing out. So once we started getting plugged into Dr. Gordon, then plugging into this doctor, then my brother met, I think Kurt Parsley and Dr. Martine, and my brother had a 5-MeO experience, and it was absolutely profound.
He did Ibogaine and 5M.
No, just 5. He went straight to the rocket.
Interesting.
Yeah. So he said, well, he came back with a whole new vocabulary. I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, but there's a new side of you that I haven't seen since your injury.
You saw the change in him immediately.
Oh, yeah.
What did that look like?
It was like life just returned to him. It was like just this passion. There was, when he had his TBI, there were times that he became very robotic in nature, very disconnected from emotion. And the hormone protocols brought some of that back, but he was like forever changed. 5 brought more of him home, I would say. So I was like, wow, okay. Well, I didn't experience TBIs like you did. I flew in the Apache. I had a different experience in combat. So I don't feel like I've, got the head injuries like you do. And I told him, it sounds really intriguing. I mean, I'd be open to kind of doing it, but I don't know. He's like, well, maybe there's something you'll learn about yourself. If you do it. First for me was ayahuasca, 2016.
What was that like for you?
Oh man, it was in 2 days. I didn't 3 days in the Texas underground. The first 2 days, um, I felt terrible. I didn't know how to surrender. I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't really have an experience. Like, I fought it off.
Yeah, I think that's very common for a lot of people.
Yeah.
The first couple times, your mind fights the experience. It doesn't really get in.
Yeah, it's exactly, what I did. And then the third day was so powerful, and just, I guess a way to describe it would be like, that was the first time that I was like understood what love was. And I just had this most incredible experience that's just so hard to really put words to and describe. But I didn't know what to do with that experience. And there weren't really any groups, or we had an integration circle the next day. We kind of talked about it. And then it was like, okay, back to try and do this nonprofit work and try and build this thing. And yeah, the nonprofit work was really hard in that we would run out of funds, and I would have to go and get like a job. And then we would, build up our donations. My brother would entice me to come back and work with them some more. This became very challenging for the family. And so in 2016, I started working at Accenture Consulting, doing change management. And it was a great skill set and great trajectory, but my heart was in this veteran work. And so I'd just been through all that trauma with my brother, trying to get to being whole again. And he was doing good. But I had this one experience, but I hadn't quit drinking, and wasn't really aware of all how tightly wound I was from a decade's worth of being an attack helicopter pilot in combat. I didn't know how much things were just entrenched into the way I was operating and attacking everything as a way of life. And so, and going from that high octane environment to trying to get this nonprofit where nobody knows what you're talking about, healing your brain, and neuroplasticity and repairing neural pathways, um, and then going into the high octane, corporate consulting environment. I was just redlined for like my entire adult life, and then my younger brother, who was also in the infantry, was experiencing significant hardship, and he decided to take his life, or attempt to, and we knew it was happening. So it was like we knew he was in a vulnerable state. We were on high alert with him, and we knew he had went dark, and we were in a frantic search to find him before he did it. And my older brother was, I think he was at Fort Bragg, or he was somewhere else. I can't remember where he was. My parents, they're in our hometown in Great Bayou where we grew up, and calling all his friends, like, um, I like, I was living close by, and drove downtown to all like the bars that he would be at. I couldn't find him anywhere, and just calling my mom, just being like, "Where could he be? Where could he be?" Oh, the girl that he was dating that had killed herself, and he found her body, and so that was kind of like the catalyst for him. And he said they used to go down to Park, and I said that's where he is. So I got in my car and I drove down there like as fast as I could. It's like 2 a.m. and there's one car in the parking lot, and it's his. And it's just like the closer you get to it, like the more intense that it becomes, until I get up to the car door and I don't know what I'm gonna find. And I open the door and he's not there. And it was like a relief at the same time. Like it was just like, so I just start like screaming his name in the park at night, trying to find him.
Mm.
And as I see this body laying over there, and I run over to him, and I dive on him. I don't know what I'm gonna find, and he's somewhat lucid, and there's like, there's no blood. He's taken something, so I don't know what it is. And so I call the ambulance, and I stay with them until they can get there, to take him. And 2 weeks later, I was down in Mexico for Ibogaine and 5, because
You had been through a lot for
I'd
many
been
years.
through a lot. And my brother, like, we had the network at that point, so I told my brother, on the other side of that, I was just like, I don't know how to do life anymore. In 2018, I said, I can't break out of these thoughts. I think that like somebody's gonna die at any moment. It was absolute like a living hell.
Mm.
I think I had a newborn at home, our third. So I had two young kids, and our marriage had been, struggled through all these things. And so I went down there with little to no preparation, just desperate. And in 3 days, we took Ibogaine, a rest day, and on my 35th birthday, I had 5-MeO. And I really do, the combination of those two were so powerful. It's really like a life before that and a life after that.
What did Ibogaine show you?
Yeah, for me, again, so little work and preparation, being able to surrender into the medicine and know what it is. So I kind of defaulted back to what I did in my unknowingly in my ayahuasca experience, was I fought it. I fought it for 10 hours until I was so exhausted that I just kind of succumbed to it. And when I did, yeah, I very much like went into this yeah, very visual, very vivid. Remember being like the third party observer, and I was just, I don't know, the best way to describe it is like in my inner consciousness, and this like sentence would like appear, and I would read it, and then it would like transport me to a memory. And then that memory, it was almost like I was the Flash, like moving in it while everything was just, it was alive, it was real. It wasn't like a freeze frame, but it was, and I knew everything about that memory in an instant, like complete and total gnosis. If it was a memory you and I had, it was like I understood everything that I did in that, but also your perspective and how that impacted you. And I just remember thinking to myself, I was like, oh my gosh, I said, I need to go and talk to my dad. I need to so and so. And I would finish that memory and I would go back to that like inner consciousness and a new sentence would appear and I would read it and it would take me to another memory. And so it was absolutely unreal. I don't know how many times that happened, you know? I don't know if that was like an hour or 2 hour and I did that like a million times or whatever. And the next morning when I was talking to the coach and telling it, she's like, well, you know, what was the memory? Like, what did you learn? And I was like, I can't remember any one specific thing. And I was like, what the heck does that mean? Why would I be shown all these things, got this insight? I can't even remember it. And, you know, years later, kind of looking back, the way I reconcile it is that it wasn't for me to know right then. Like I got that healing at the subconscious level. And I got that knowing and that perspective shift. And that healing uh and now learning, you know, what's happening at the neurocognitive level and all the pathways that are being connected and cleared out. I know that you know, prepared the runway for 5-MeO for me, honestly.
Yeah, so talk a little bit about the 5-MeO then, because, for veterans specifically, traditionally, or over the last 10 years, they've often go together, Ibogaine and 5-MeO, and I've heard, people say sort of Ibogaine brings up challenges, false belief systems, helps you look at your ego, your pain, and then the 5-MeO brings you directly to God or source, so it lightens your burdens. Or, Ibogaine can be very rough, 5-MeO can clear everything and, I don't know, help you integrate the Ibogaine, I guess. Remind you why you're here too, where we're going, right? It's what happens before birth and after death, and
Yeah, it was all those things for me and more. I think for me, well, it was interesting. On the Ibogaine, one of the coach asked me when it was time to take it, why I just popped the pills like they were Pez
Mhm.
and didn't say like a prayer and intention. I was like, I didn't know I was supposed to. Like I came down here to take this. I thought we're here. I came in. I take it. I'm gonna do the thing. You know, very militaristic.
or how the Western world takes medication. You just take
Like
the well,
why would I say the prayer right now? I don't know.
yeah.
So we had that coaching in between. So at least between the five, like I knew to set an intention. So it was my 35th birthday and I was away from my family and I was down here to work on myself because things weren't going well. So I set this intention that was essentially, I'm going to receive this as a gift because it's my birthday, with love and gratitude because I knew that those were at least the two of the most powerful forces, you know, in the universe at that time. And I'm here to help better understand myself, how to heal myself, and the interconnectedness of all things. Like, you know, I'm seeking, like, what is this? And I knew that there was work to do at home. So I knew that if I could get something from this, that I could help my wife and my kids and help my family, you know? And then this veteran work that I'd started, I was trying to figure out how to serve and be a part of. Um, I knew that it was like my calling and my purpose. So I knew that if I could be whole, my family could be whole, I could pour out more for the community. And I knew I needed pillars of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual strength. So I went in knowing that I needed to surrender finally to the medicine and having a good, clear intention. And, you know, before my head hit the pillow, you know, I didn't exist anymore. And that's a really incredible thing to experience and yet still be. Um, and then, yeah, what transpired after that, it was, I don't know if I'm doing this right. And so it was this kind of like mindset and mentality of, am I on the medicine? Am I not on the medicine? The facilitators are looking at me. Am I getting the right out of the experience? And all of a sudden, you know, the medicine really took hold of that thought and took it, you know, to the depths of the end of infinity where like I in my mind had caused Earth to cease to exist and space time to stop and everybody to be gone except my consciousness still existed. And I was eternally separated from everything and everyone. And so at that point in time, it was the greatest hell that I had ever experienced. And
I mean, it was terrifying.
absolutely.
Well, you're someone who's always been in control, right? And controlling your world. And here you had to surrender, let go, and something was moving through you. You were being controlled for the first
Yeah, and the thought process was like, oh, I'm not doing this right. Oh, like I'm actually messing this up for everybody else. Oh, like we're actually messing this up and we're not going to be able to get back into the United States because we're in Mexico. Oh, we're actually going to, like people are going to go to jail because of this. And like the thought, it spiraled and spiraled. And it was me at the center of all of this, that I had the ability to not just mess this up for me, but for everybody else, all the way to like ending all of humanity, and that my ego was big enough to think that were the case.
that you had such power to ruin it for everyone else. This was all during 5-MeO?
Yeah. So then that part of me like died in there, and I kind of woke back up. And when I woke back up, I was equally as grateful that I wasn't in that reality anymore. And that was so weird coming back from this kind of eternal place. And then I started, kind of like puddle on the ground, crying and confronting what I had came there to address. And that was having an empty cup and pouring out for my brothers and everybody else, and having no real practice and way to fill up for myself. And then it just kind of, this transformation has happened in real time, where next thing I know, I was like standing, erect, fully up, chest out. And it was like I went from that puddle on the floor to like just like this position of strength. And I, in that moment, connected into the spirit of Christ and Christ, from my faith and my upbringing in a way that I never knew was possible. And I felt, very much, there were other Navy SEALs there. And, I have cousins that are Navy SEALs. My brothers were all in. And it was just, it was this vision of there is good in the world, there is bad in the world. And those things personified also exist to the far extremes, all the way to the neutral middle. And within that, it felt like part of my purpose with the call to the veteran was being able to, in a true militaristic sense, fight that which was not good and help create pathways for people to find the good. And it was such a powerful experience that the facilitator, afterwards asked if I wanted to lay back down. And I was like, yeah, sure. And I laid back down for a few minutes, and then I woke back up and I was like, what in the...
You had a
What just happened?
A rebirth.
I had a complete and total death and a complete and total rebirth, 100%. And it was so powerful. It was so hard for me to express like what had happened. And within that, there was great support, mechanisms and metrics. But like a week later, I was back in the corporate boardroom at a toxic client, not knowing how sensitive, I was to everything, right? Because of what I'd just been through. And I had a question directed at me, and I I blanked, I stalled in my mind. It was almost like I was back in the influence of the medicine in the corporate boardroom. Everybody's looking at me, and I thought I was back like in a 5-MeO experience, and it was terrifying. I thought I broke myself. I had to apologize to my partners, and I didn't talk to anybody about it. I just kind of, I was too ashamed to like reach out back to the facilitators or the people because of like what I experienced. I didn't even feel comfortable recounting to them what I had. So I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that it was an incredible experience, 7, 8 years ago, that the Ibogaine gave me this kind of like reset of my neural pathways and my neurocircuitry, and kind of taught me how to surrender, and through the process of it, how to set intentions, by not setting intentions. And then this incredible, blowout death and rebirth experience on the 5, and then going back into environments and places, not knowing who I am or how to show up or how to prepare. And I fell back into old patterns, really for the next 3 years, and probably made the ruts even deeper to get out of, because I
You
didn't
didn't have the
know.
proper support or
Yeah.
community. It really speaks to the need for community, and everyone talks about integration, but what is integration? How do you build it into a program?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, those were the questions they were kinda asking, and so
So how I think before we get to, we can talk a little bit about Beond Service and how that came to be.
yeah.
What did you do after that, and what did your path related to your advocacy work look like? Because you'd already done so much, but now that you've had this awakening and you see that there's a need for more community and integration, how did you get to working with Veteran Mental Health Leadership Coalition? And you're a founder,
Yeah.
right?
So 2021, we, for those 3 years in between, continued to try and provide for the family, try and help my brother with the nonprofit. We ended up writing a book. It got made into a feature documentary.
What's
You
the name of the book and the documentary?
Tales from the Blast Factory, is the book. Quiet Explosions is the documentary. And he went on Rogan a couple more times, so that mission kinda continued in parallel to, like, providing for the family, while I just, like, continued to not apply all the things that I knew how to do. In 2021, I was kinda bankrupt again, and I left corporate. I went back to work with my brother at that point, full time. This was the 3rd time I went back to work with him, and he was, Amber and Marcus are, kind of friends of ours from vets, and my cousin, Marcus was on my cousin's team. They were on SEAL Team 6 together. So we knew him from that. We knew him, from kinda doing this veterans work, and, when my younger brother, had tried to take his life, Marcus and Amber came over to my parents' house because we were all living in DFW, and they, kinda made my mom feel okay about my younger brother going down, and Marcus, took my younger brother down and
Down to do Ibogaine.
yeah, and do 5, and so, it's just the community, taking care of each other. And then when, Chad, committed suicide, the Navy SEAL, then they wanted to start, vets, and, told us that they wanted to start it, and what do we think? And, my brother was, super pumped and excited, like, yes, like we need this. And so because of that, and their pathway and relationship with, Rick Perry, they called on my brother when they were advocating for Texas House Bill 1802, which is kind of the first legislation passed in the country for
What
these
year was that?
therapies. 2021.
2021.
Yeah. So I was kind of like loosely monitoring that my brother was telling me he was doing some stuff with legislators. I was like, oh, that's awesome. Like, because I was still kind of doing the corporate thing.
2021 was really the first year where veterans' mental health with psychedelic assisted therapies became policy work in the US.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, so Amber and Marcus, like I guess they had the relationship with Perry. The bill was starting to emerge. So they were looking for who were the other veterans that they were going to come to share the stories of transformation. So it was like Morgan and Marcus Luttrell, Dakota Meyer, Medal of Honor winner, and then my brother. I'm not sure if there were others involved. And that's where kind of this initial blueprint emerged of leading with the science and data, because they had Dr. Lynette Averill from the Baylor College School of Medicine, who's now Chief Science Officer over at the Coalition and Reason for Hope. And then you had the legislative star power from Rick Perry. It's kind of a big deal in Texas.
To now, it just unlocked $50 million for Ibogaine
Yeah.
research.
Yeah, 4 years later, right? And so all we did was do 4 years of growth and execute that playbook. And then it was all these veteran stories, and they passed that bill like quite unanimously. And like everything changed, like the climate changed. I met Rick Perry, Dr. Averill, and Logan Davidson of Texas for Greater Mental Health at the press conference for 1802 in October of 2021. And I went to Vet's inaugural gala that November, and I had already come back to work with my brother full time, looking to like not have to go back and get a regular job again. I was like, I'm staying this time. And it was like this art of the possible was emerging. When we were writing the book initially, my brother tried to put a chapter, kind of a bolt-on chapter about psychedelics, and it didn't fit the rest of the book. So like me and the ghostwriter like encouraged him to not include it. And to be fair, it didn't fit.
It could probably be its own book now.
It could definitely be its own book now. But then we were at the gala and the bill had passed, and I'm like, what world are we living in where
Was that the gala with Tim Ferriss?
Yeah.
I was there too.
Oh, you were?
I don't think we knew
I was
each other
sitting
yet.
at Alex Dominguez's table
Oh, wow.
with and Perry like recognized him. He stood up and I got a clip of him.
I remember
Yeah.
meeting Rick Perry, and yeah,
I was like, Rick Perry, Rick Doblin, and Tim Ferriss, who, by the way,
it was the most interesting. I mean, you have those three people on stage, Rick Doblin and Rick Perry. They come, one's far left.
polar opposites. Yeah. So that was wild. And I was like, wow. So I saw Amber Marcus like really inspired me because we had never done a fundraiser before at that point. So we were looking and I was like, you know what? We need to do Warrior Angels fundraiser. This can turn into a long story, so I'll be short on this one. But we ended up doing a David Goggins. He's a Navy SEAL challenge. We run 40 miles every 48 hours. 4x4x48. 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours. So we did it a fundraiser. We brought 4 nonprofits together. It was Vets, it was Heroic Hearts, it was Special Operations Association of America, and Warrior Angels Foundation. We partnered with Native American spiritual elders of North America, and they came and did an opening ceremony. They did blessings before each leg. We did a TP peyote ceremony in the middle of it, which is absolutely wild. I can't believe
This is wild. This is where, you start to see veterans' mental health and spiritual practices. If you come to Beond, you'll see a lot of these veterans who are, doing yoga, sound healing, and it's like, wow. I mean, and these guys love it. At first, it's weird, but
It's
then they
weird.
really into it.
So that was like kind of like prototyping, like how do we awaken the warrior spirit? What is the warrior spirit? The warrior spirit is not just going to war. The warrior spirit is being able to be a humble servant.
I mean, you were an Apache helicopter pilot. I was just
Yeah.
reading how, the Apache helicopter pilots are named after Native Americans.
All the aircraft in the Army are after different tribes.
Full circle.
So yeah, it is crazy. And in that TP ceremony, they put kind of me and my brother in the seat of honor, which was unforecasted and unknown that they were going to do that. Then everybody else came through and they gave us the opportunity to speak and address in the sacred circle, and they showed us how to express ourselves. And that night we prayed for healing for all veterans. We prayed for, they came in a spirit of Christ and they said, not 500 years of atrocity against us from the military, but Adam, Andrew, veterans, like we're hurting too. Our people are hurting too. We've had people that have served in the military more so proportionally, percentage-wise for our population than any other population set, the wind talkers, everything. So we have family members that haven't come home also. We want to pray for you. We want to show that we're acknowledging that you guys, these veteran nonprofits, are on the front lines of neuro restoration, psychedelic assisted therapies, being able to come together in unity and oneness. And that's kind of how we got on their radar to partner for the event anyway. And so it was that event and these veterans coming together and this spirit of humility and love at the center of it, where I said, man, I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to help other people feel this feeling that these Native Americans have ignited in me. And really, that was the first spark of me reconnecting to my faith, because I saw how bold they were in their faith and that they had never departed from it. And I was like, why do I not have any kind of spiritual practice? I have a very rich upbringing in faith. So that was a huge catalyst. 2020, the Texas House Bill 1802 had already kind of passed, and people were starting to gather and talk about and form. And so Lieutenant General Marty Steele and Brett Waters reached out to me and my brother, and they said, hey, we're going to start this coalition, and we'd like for you guys to be a part of it.
The Veteran Mental Health Leadership Coalition. What is it?
That's a good question. And I literally had to Google, what is a coalition for policy work? Like, that's what I knew about.
Well, it's really a diverse group of people coming together, right? But I'd love to hear more.
And that was
part of it.
So the hypothesis was, the blueprint has emerged in Texas. What if we take that blueprint? What if we model it out at the state and the federal level? What if we get these veteran organizations that had fruited over the last 10 years kind of more focused more narrowly on these things. So now another of us had come online. So what would that look like if we could bring our voices together? And it was also for me personally, I had a blueprint that I knew how I was going to pour into it. One from the Native Americans and what they had shown us of how to come together in unity. One from starting my own nonprofit with my brother, doing all that work, from the leadership time that I had in the military, and then the time doing large scale technology transformations for Fortune 100 clients.
Right. You were born always younger and really see how the trajectory of her life has all come together here.
Oh, it's incredible. Like I could have never. So we did an advocacy day at the Pennsylvania Capitol in 2022. We went and we talked there, and we basically modeled out like going and doing office calls, having our talking points, signage. There was media there. We had the Rotunda Capitol. We had a list of speakers. And this is funny. Once again, I had comments prepared, and my brother ended up being the last speaker, and I didn't speak because the lesson was all these times that microphones weren't put in my hands because it wasn't time for me to speak. That's a lesson I had to learn. That was a hard lesson. Um, but my consultant was like, once I saw this, I was like, oh, I get it. I see what we're doing here. I know how we need to bring people together. And so I just kind of offered up to Brett. I was like, hey, if you want to grow this coalition to be, and you want it to be nonprofits like the one me and my brother had, like we've been on and off part-time for years, just trying to struggle to make this thing survive.
Mhm.
So I know what it's like to be able to get me somewhere. So you're going to have to think about communication this way. If you want them to show up, you're going to have to think about it this way. We need to have like a monthly call, and we need to put out information. And I just kind of gave these recommendations for how we would come together. And Brett and General Seal and Jesse McLaughlin came on to be the state director. And they were really good at kind of like the initial kind of like strategy and targets of opportunity. And then it was just seeing how could we organize our forces, and then how could we show up at the different events to start making change at the massive level. Because, the problem my brother and I ran into is like, we're never going to fundraise enough money to be able to get this to the hundreds of thousands of veterans that need it. Not even talking about the rest of humanity. And so how are we, little nonprofit, going to raise the billions of dollars? So once we could see that the state governments, the ones that sent us over to the wars, and the broken healthcare systems and the pharma, military, industrial complex, that we could come together with equal part science, equal part legislation, equal parts healing stories of transformation to be able to affect the change and open up funding and be able to bring that into these programs to get wider access. Then that's really what the work became. And it wasn't too long after that we got the first call in December of 2022 from Brian Hubbard
To come to Kentucky and help out there.
Yeah. So that was wild because, everything just kind of happened organically. And it's like, there's some states where we focused the attention and where progress had kind of been made. And we also had to have a federal strategy to boot. And then so much of my time in 2022 was going and talking to all the leaders of these organizations and basically just kind of telling them the vision for what the coalition could be, create a membership process, all the infrastructure and things that we needed to be able to support connecting people and being able to communicate with them. So it became a decentralized node of communication. And through that, Jesse Gould introduced Brian Hubbard to us. We got on a call, and he, man, the first time I was on the call with him, I remember after he got done speaking, all of us were just kind of like, we had to pick our jaws up.
Mic drop.
Yeah, because
he's
like, who is this guy?
he's
Looks like a linebacker. He's like a lawyer. He's
brawl.
he's like speaks like a Civil War era general meets like Foghorn Leghorn with like the most refined English that you have. And he's talking about, I just talked about my experiences, like using the language and the way that I have and understand them. And if Brian came in here and talked about all the same things that I just went through, his would be way more entertaining because of the verbiage he used
and how he speaks. Yeah.
So there's something very special that we all saw in him, and everybody sees in him. And So he, yeah, they obviously had won the money for, suing the pharmaceutical companies for the opioid epidemic. He was the commissioner for the Kentucky Opioid Abatement Advisory Commission. They had half that money being allocated for to treat opioid addiction in Kentucky. And he wanted help creating an argument to go to the attorney general to get permission to explore it.
So then the Veteran Mental Health Leadership Coalition stepped in to help.
Yeah, and that was it. So we stepped in and we started pulling the scientists and helping just to make sure that he had a solid argument. So Joseph Barsuglia, Martin Polanco committed so much. And then on the veteran side, he wanted to do a press conference. So we went and got a bunch of the stories. Again, Martin Polanco, who had treated so many veterans, connecting with me. And then, you basically go in, it's kind of like going fishing, right? You're trying to find the person that's far enough along in their journey that can, kind of quantify their experience that's, palatable for the audience.
I think Brett called me at one point and said, can you come in and share your story? I'm not a veteran, obviously, but, I've been, I think, free of opiates from Ibogaine for, 13, 14 years. And we already had a treatment center and was happy to share, of course.
Yeah, and that was the first time that I heard about Beond. And I think you had invited me down towards the end to come and see it. And I was just like, thanks so much, Talia. You're a wonderful person. Hashtag pass on Ibogaine for a second time was like my mindset.
Yeah, because you had your first experience, which was, it sounds,
I was just
your first experience.
I didn't feel like I needed to go back to it. So I want to get quickly to Beond Service because that's what I really want to talk about. So last year, the MDMA decision at the FDA, it wasn't necessarily our fight at VMHLC, but everybody came together because it was a big target of opportunity to get more of these therapies, to folks. And when it didn't happen, like I was pissed, everybody else was pissed. And, I'm talking to people all day, every day in the space. And, some people just kind of ghosted, and there was like a lot of people were really down. I could sense it for sure.
I mean, Brett Waters, who, is one of the founders along with you in the Veteran Mental Health Leadership Coalition, said it set you guys hit the organization back like a year.
Yeah. I mean, I think
Or he was saying that
there was a lot of engagement stuff that happened, but I just like so I was coming on like 10 years from starting the nonprofit with my brother, and it's just like a very reflectionary time for me personally. And so I was just like, what are we doing? Where have I been? Like, how did I even get here? Do I believe in these things? Do I believe fighting for another 10 years? Do I believe that people have the right to experience these things, to combat, specifically within the veteran community? And everything was like a resounding yes, that I do, and that everything had not been wasted, and that more so we're just um, going into a little bit of a consolidation phase before we go into our next expansion phase. And, at this point in time, I also get the opportunity to share my thoughts with so many leaders that also help them kind of think through and shape how they're going to show up and lead next. So I needed like some talking points for the year ahead, what we're going to address. And not only that, I also made the internal intention to go back to closer to the front lines, the advocacy work, right? So for 2 years at that point, we'd done so much in such a short amount of time, but it was just all consuming. And so, I had started to just try and get people the help they need right here, right now. And that's what brings me so much joy, is getting to see somebody else. Even this week, we had somebody who all the way up until the last day, before her 5, was just carrying a lot of weight. And she looks 1,000 pounds lighter and is smiling for the first time. And to get to see that happen in real time, like I'm going to go home and take more home. So it was like, how could I get back to that? And so I think it was Ryan Roberts that was working a lot with, kind of Tom, and thinking about, you guys were thinking about a veterans program here and what it could be. And so the conversation just kind of started, and we came down November of last year with the intention to start a program. And it was Clayton and Lindsay who run the program now on the operations side. Marty, who was the first sergeant with Clayton in Afghanistan, who just really needed some help for himself. And a couple other folks, and Tom, and we just said, what is this program going to be? And within that, made the opportunity to have Ibogaine again. And I was like, oh man, dang, do I really want to? But I was just like, if I'm going to help support this program and I'm going to recommend it, then I need to experience it here. And I need to come down and see beyond, for myself. And that's kind of what I did. And the way I like to tell a story, and I do tell a story, and I'm glad that I get to say it in front of you, because Tom always talks about your journey, his journey, and then how much he loves you, but also that he wanted to build the place that the love of his life should have had the opportunity to experience. So I was like, oh man, okay, so when I come down here, I should see how much he loves Talia. And when I left here, I was like, wow, he really
He
loves
loves me a
you.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, that was my experience in a nutshell. Was just I prayed a lot about doing the medicine. I talked to my wife again, and because I've had some really profound experiences, and just really happy being practically grounded and just doing the work, service work. But I did. It was so beautiful here in so many different ways. And then yeah, getting to spend the second half of that like working on and focusing on how we want to build this program called Beond Service, which I just love that name too. And the things that I'm really proud of, we just finished our 10th cohort, and 50 veterans, male, female, and veteran spouses have gone through. And I think that's one of the things I'm most proud about, is that they're not just special forces operators, um, that everybody's welcome to this program. So that was really important to us when we were planning it.
So that's a gap you saw in what currently existed for veterans and, Ibogaine or psychedelic.
I think by the nature of their work, they're exposed to so much more, but there's also more funding, for them to do those types of things. So a lot of people kind of get left behind. They want their opportunity. So I was really pleased that we were taking that approach. Two, there was conversation about like genders in the cohorts, and we ended up doing female only cohorts in addition to male only instead of combined, because there's a lot of military sexual trauma. And it was great because there were some some Clayton's spouse that was there, and Lorna was also there, and they were just kind of talking. And I would have never thought about that because I was never really like part of my story or things that I were exposed to. But I was so glad for their perspective, to be able to bring that in so that females could come through and be really safe and get the full experience they need to, not by inadvertently putting a male in there and not even realizing that you could be limiting their ability to address things. So male cohorts, female cohorts, spouses, man, my wife has been with me through all of this, and she's been through so much. And even from the inception of taking her away from her hometown to be married to me, to
You're being pregnant for 9 months and having the baby
missing
without
on
you.
earth, and that's how we started our marriage. When I came back, we were so out of sync because of how we had grown in that year.
It really makes sense to treat the whole family.
Treating the whole family is so important. And so the fact that we were going to have we didn't know, we wanted to do like, okay, a male, a female, spouses, like for 10, it ultimately ended up being 6 male, 2 female, and 2 spouses, which were all female spouses. And that's just so powerful to me. And I've got to come down here and help support the first spouses in March, and then this last one here, cohort number 10. And
Thank you, by the way.
oh,
So grateful to have you.
well, one, coming back here is like coming home, like seeing the staff here. It's such a special place that everybody should have the opportunity to come and experience. And when you do, you want to come back. And when you're here, you realize that what happens here, if you could find ways to create that in the world would be a much better place. And even Marty, one of the Beyond coaches now, who
He was cohort 0, I think, or
these are
1.
these are the coolest arcs, right? It's happening in real time. Marty came here because Clayton was starting the operation, and him and Marty went to combat together and came back. So Clayton says, Marty, I think you could come and benefit from this. Then he's just going to come because Clay told him to. But then in doing this strange Ibogaine thing that he knew nothing about, he had such a profound experience. And Marty was a ranger instructor. So for ranger school in the Army that creates the United States, rangers, that puts them out into the ranger battalions or sends somebody ranger qualified back to their unit. Marty was an instructor for that. And so it's one of the most, hardcore schools that we have in the military. So his job was to train these soldiers to become more elite warriors, to go and do whatever our nation, asked of us to do. And when he was here, I got to see him in real time come to the realization that, and he was struggling a lot too at that time. And he's like, all that training wasn't for nothing. It was so that I could have the skills to be able to know how to train somebody, but it wasn't to be able to train soldiers to go to combat. The real purpose of all that was so that I could use that here in Beond Service to help soldiers fully come home from combat.
And he's a great coach.
That was one of the greatest, single moments of, transformation and getting it in real time. And then he came back to become a facilitator, and we use the term facilitator for the cohorts a little differently in the psychedelic space. So not a psychedelic facilitator, but facilitation of the cohort of the veteran group that's going through.
Support.
So, yeah, support. So he's the lead support for 2 cohorts that came through, then went and got his Being True to You certification, and now coaching the retail Beond
Civilian
side
Yeah.
of Beond, in addition to doing that. And so you see, I don't know what
He's
this thing
flourishing. He's
flourishing.
before your very eyes, and
It's been 9 months.
9 months, right?
9 months.
Yeah.
There's just incredible stories like that. So on the spouse's side, Sheena, who I saw go through the program in March, after 10 years of battle with alcohol and everything that she went through on the other side of service, and then now she's a supporting facilitator for this spouse's cohort. So it's so cool to see now the 50 alumni that we have on this program, and having a community and having an opportunity to serve and give back. And the thing that I'm really excited about for this program for the future is thinking about, what can a alumni of heart-centered servant warriors of 50, of 150, of 500 do on the other side of their healing? Very much so giving back to the program, but it's also about serving, right there. It's about growing where you're planted, being able to, maybe it's serve at your kid's school. Maybe it's serve at your local church. Maybe it's show up in Texas and share your story to help raise the most amount of funds that's ever been raised for psychedelics in the history of the world, for Ibogaine in Texas, which just happened this year. And Beond Service alumni got to be there, lending their voices. I think we had some people come down to some media and journalists, and there's one of the most incredible documentaries that I've ever seen, let alone about Ibogaine and what they were able to tell the story of what's happening, all the way from what happens here when somebody comes down here, not just to experience this medicine, but to have the opportunity to begin their transformation. And yes, they get to come down here and have this medicine as part of it, but that's just one part. It's all this preparation and all this integration, all these things that I didn't have the opportunity to have when I experienced these profound medicines. And they were beautiful experiences, and it was a path that was for me. But how can you get people to become whole and not have to go through so many setbacks?
What we went through, what I went through also 15 years ago. It's so great to have these tools now for others to learn from what we didn't have and provide them for others. That just warms my heart to have a facility, and to see the ripple effects, as you were saying, for people. Yeah. So I'm very grateful you've been on this show, and thank you for sharing your story and your brother's story, and the Beond Service work and your advocacy work in general. It's very inspiring for many. I really appreciate it. Is there anything else you want to say? Where can people find you?
Yes, I just want to say how appreciative I am of you and to you and Tom, and the ripple effects from you, like you said, from your story, from creating an environment and a place that can be a better vision and a better experience than what you went through. And I think that if more of us, wherever we're at, like whatever we have the opportunity to experience, if we can think about ways in which we can improve it for others. And so I'm just so grateful to you in all the ways that that's felt and expressed here. And man, I'm just so excited for the future and for more people to be able to have this opportunity and experience it. I think, for me, LinkedIn is fine, or Instagram, @Marr_. Yeah, so reach out and I'd love to connect with you. Thank you for this time, Talia.
Thank you.
Yeah.